player empowerment. We're in year 12, and we just saw the first ever double player empowerment trade here with Harden and Simmons. One guy quit on his team 9 months ago. The other guy quit on his other team 12 months ago and then forced his way to this new team, which he also decided he didn't like. When has this just become bad? When have we, and are we there yet? Because I was talking to a friend of mine today and I was just like, I don't like the league as much. I still love basketball. I still love watching basketball. And I don't know whether I'm the old guy who's, things were better back in the day, because I don't feel that way about the NFL. I like the NFL more than I have in 10 years. I think the NFL, forget about the owners and how reprehensible some of that stuff's been and Goodell as a commissioner. I'm just talking about the actual product and the players they have in the league. I like it more than I've liked it probably since the 2000s. I really enjoy watching these quarterbacks and how they've been able to open up, and I don't have to watch guys get carried off the field every 5 seconds. And I feel like the NBA is veering the other way with these guys that the moment they don't like their situation, they're just like, get me out of here. And it's turned into a get me out of here league, which is why the guys like Ja and Jokic, who are just like, this is where I want to be. I love playing with these guys. Jokic loses Murray and Porter. You never heard him say like, oh man, well, I don't know. We'll see if I stay. Like, he's just like, who's on my team? I'm wearing this uniform. I'm playing. I don't like where the league's going, KOC. Where do you stand on all this?
I mean, you brought up the NFL. With the NFL, but their changes were like to on-field rules to improve the products. With the NBA, you're talking about like, well, what's the off-court, the negotiated BRI stuff, CBA that they're going to have to change to address the issue that you have with it. I mean, I think for the NBA, there's pros and cons. I mean, we're having a great time talking about all these trades. I'm having fun. I'm enjoying the conversations and the stories. That's part of the reason why I love the NBA. It's like, I love the sport of basketball itself. I also love all the stories and the business side of, the basketball as well. So I personally enjoy like all this drama and the fact that players are able to move. However, from the team perspective, building out a roster, building a culture, building an identity, that is so important, for fans, for growing a connection with a team and having really something that you feel like you're invested in. And so for the NBA, I would be curious about like how they think that affects their bottom line in terms of growing the game out in the United States. Because with the NFL, like, like the Steelers have an identity, the Ravens have an identity. Like with the NBA, teams don't really have that type of an identity. And that's just different. I wouldn't say it's worse, but it's definitely different than like the way we experience the NFL as a fan.
Yeah, I first I hate the term player empowerment era. I remember I talked to Dominique Foxworth about it one day, and it was just like, what are they empowered to do? Pick teams, right? And to speak to that specifically, like, there's a big difference between LeBron basically signing his rookie extension, as it were, and saying, I'm not going to do the full 6 years. I'm going to do the 4 as a signal to everybody, like, get your asses ready that summer. I'm going to be available, right?
Yep.
And marshaling a lot of interest around him being available at 25, 26 years old, best player since Jordan or whatever. There's a difference between that and Ben Simmons having 4 years left on his deal and refusing to hoop. That's like, to me, those are worlds apart. Like, what Ben Simmons did was fucked up, was stupid, and shouldn't be allowed to happen. Like, straight up, like, you can be mad at your teammates. You can want to be on another team. You can put pressure on your front office and management. But, bro, you should be showing up to work, okay? And you should be busting your ass. Like, James Harden, what he did at the end of Houston, that was dicey. That was very shaky. Like, the expectation from everybody should be that we show up and we bust our ass to play. That's why I was like annoyed by the John Wall thing. It's like a lot of this stuff I feel like goes towards devaluing the actual product, the actual game. And I honestly think it's Adam freaking Silver's fault. One, because, all of this emphasis on winning the internet, all of this emphasis on all of that 365 sport, blah, blah, blah. And quite frankly, like, they devalue the actual product on the floor. As for like player empowerment, I don't think the players are actually empowered to do much. They get folded up every fucking CBA. I don't know how powerful these guys actually are. I just think if you're signed, fam, you should show up to the game and try your hardest. Now, if you yelling at dudes like Jimmy Butler in practice, making shit uncomfortable, I'm for that, right? But Jimmy Butler didn't say, yo, I'm leaving the team. I'm not showing up because I can't stand these bum-ass kids. He was like, no, I'm going to make things very uncomfortable for them while also actually doing my job. Some of this other stuff is just garbage, quite frankly. I don't know why we got to categorize it as Ben Simmons has power. Ben Simmons was being a nuisance and a baby. And he got really lucky that James Harden also was tired of where he was at, and he ended up in Brooklyn because it could have got dark for him in some of these other markets.
Yeah, that's a good point. It shouldn't be called the player empowerment era. It should be called like the merry-go-round era. Because that's really what it is. And I'm with you on Simmons. I was explaining, my wife knows nothing. And I was like, she's like, any big trades today? And I was like, yeah, this Ben Simmons thing. And she's like, oh, what's going on with him? Like, she literally knows nothing. I'm like, well, he hasn't played for 8 months because he really sucked in the playoffs. And then,
which is unbelievable.
And then his coach said afterwards he wasn't sure if, he was a reliable point guard, and his feelings were hurt, so he hasn't played since. And they're also not paying him, and he's cost himself $20 million. And she was just like, what? Like I was thinking, like, how would I have explained that to myself 25 years ago, that this was an actual thing that happened, And then the Harden thing a year ago, if we had said to each other, so he's going to force his way to Brooklyn, and a year from now, he's going to force his way. So I'm like, no, that's too crazy. Come on. Kyle, you love the actual mechanics of basketball as much as anybody I've met. And yet this stuff is overshadowing it constantly. I see the KOC point because I agree with you. It's more fun for people like us, right? It's more fun for podcast content and angles and our website and all those different things. But on the other hand, I think it's telling that the teams that have resonated the most this season with fans, with the people who actually give a shit, are Memphis and Cleveland and Phoenix and Golden State. Mm-hmm. Those four teams. And a little bit Toronto too, where it's like teams that drafted smart, that tried to build some sort of culture, that built around a guy who actually wants to be there. And and I think we like that. I think we like the idea of teams staying together, of nucleuses versus like, oh, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. I hate the I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there era. And maybe that's what we should call it. Where do you stand, Kyle? I think
it's important that like we haven't seen like a full shift into like every single year the team up teams are winning. I think these past playoffs, if like Brooklyn had knocked off that Milwaukee team that had kind of gelled over time, if they had just jumped in and knocked them off, which they might have, it's probably better for the league that they didn't. But I think in terms of like the overall product, I think that we're moving. I do think it's important that we don't get to a point where we just have this like upper echelon of the league that you have to have a merry-go-round team to win. And I think it's important for the product, like you were saying, for the Memphises, we'll see what Memphis does in the playoffs, but Chris Paul also went and joined a team that was already working. I mean, the players are empowered to kind of make decisions for themselves, and there's a whole spectrum for that. But in terms of like the product itself, I do think we're on a better path than we were in the past, specifically because I was watching, and I think Harden was kind of a big part of that, and maybe Morey discovering or just figuring out that, hey, if we get this one heliocentric player and we just like build around him and just spam these certain parts of production, like threes, layups, and generating fouls, I think we're kind of moving out of that era. Do y'all see what I mean? For from 2018 to 2020, I feel like we were obsessed with like, we need to get like a Luka, a Harden, a person that can like run a crazy amount of pick and rolls and draw a ton of fouls. I feel like we're moving more towards a Warriors model where we're valuing like wings that can be like playmakers or shooters. It's not as like you have one player, they carry a crazy load. I know that's more of like an on-court nerdy of observation, but I do think that we're on a better point, I think we're on a better track than we were like a couple years ago. I think I've seen improvement.
I think to Kyle's point there about the on-court, I think it's also true in terms of the styles of teams. I mean, we do have these teams that, it's a super team, guys force their ways there, they talk about it and try to get together, but we do have those homegrown teams. I mean, there's just more extremes in a way. Like, we're still going to have those Grizzlies teams, those Cavs teams that are homegrown and young and exciting, and they may make one big tweak like the Suns did getting Chris Paul that put them over the top. Like, that could happen in a year or 2 or 3 for Memphis or Cleveland. Like, we do have those heliocentric offenses in the NBA. We have defenses that switch a ton of screens like the Brooklyn Nets. We have teams that don't switch screens. Like, I think there's just such a range of styles in terms of team building, but also like player and team system styles. Like that's all of it, like, together is why I love basketball more than I ever have right now. I mean, because everything is just so different. There's so many different types of styles to watch and consume, whether it's the drama, whether it's the on-court, or whether it's like the business side with all the trades that we're talking about today. I personally, player empowerment, merry-go-round era, whatever you want to call it, I'm cool with it personally. I like a lot of the movement. It's fun.
Was maybe it's the social media era, because you think like all this really starts when
it is
09, 2010, right around the decision, but that's when Twitter's starting and all that stuff. But you know, the thing that makes it so hard to police, I'm with you. I actually think Adam Silver has done a poor job handling some of this stuff, because I think it really looks bad that over and over again, guys can just force them out of situations.
Bill, the league office refused to come out and say what Simmons was doing was fucked up and bad.
Right.
They didn't want to say it. They wanted the Sixers to punish him. Like, they wanted Ben to get punished and fined, but they didn't want to come out and officially be like, this is bullshit. Could you imagine David Stern allowing for that? And not that David Stern was a perfect angel.
He had some warts.
Papa Stern. I'm not trying to get all paternalistic about it. But David Stern would have never, ever stood for the Ben Simmons situation.
Well,
Ever.
but then the Harden situation too, I just think it's impossible to police, because obviously there's been tampering galore over and over again, going back to when LeBron knew.
Do you think that Harden has Daryl Morey's number? Is that possible?
I think intermediaries are used constantly with this stuff. I don't think people are texting each other. I think there's no trail, but I think there's always third people, fourth people involved. This goes back to when KOC and I, for LeBron's last year in Cleveland, we were like, he's going to the Lakers. Remember? We were like on an island. Yep. We were like, he's going to the Lakers. This is happening. And people, it happened. I think over and over and over again, we've seen that the NBA can't police this at all, that they have no recourse. We haven't seen anybody punished in any real way. And it's just going to keep happening. And I'm not sure they care, but I don't, I think it's going to lead to an unhappier league. Honestly, like it's turning into the Real Housewives of the National Basketball Association.
There's no alternative. You know why? Because the owners, remember, they used to have their 7-year contracts, where they could lock these dudes up and shackle them and hey, you're not moving from this damn decrepit franchise. As a matter of fact, I'm going to the bank just knowing that I have you locked for here, and I could do whatever I want with the roster.
Yeah, but what was the issue with that?
They started overpaying guys. They couldn't. They couldn't help themselves.
They couldn't help themselves. They made terrible contracts, and they were like, "Oh my God, save us from ourselves. We got to make the contract shorter." And now that led to this. But yeah, it all goes back to the league can't police themselves for making terrible decisions. Like Julius Randle in the old days would have a 7-year contract right now. It would be like next year, 7 years, 120 for Julius Randle. The Knicks fans would be like, "Oh my God, that's the whole decade. Shoot me."
Should the NBA, I mean, like, we're talking about like all this tampering that's obviously going on in some form. Should the NBA just drop tampering instead of having these fake, slap on the wrists rules? Or is like, because there's no policing it, like you said, Bill, like, is it the type of thing the NBA has to just say, you know what? Tampering is okay. I mean, they kind of effectively already have with the joke of the fines that teams get.
No.
Once it's out, it's out. I mean, it's kind of like the name, image, likeness thing in college. It's just like once you pass that point, it's like it'd be like if I went to the roof of a building and just cut a pillowcase open and the feathers are out there. I'm never going to get them all back. Like, it's over. They can't go back. How could you trace it? How could you police it?
And the players can tamper with each other. That's the thing you can't police.
Here's the thing, though. And I want to be careful about what I'm saying here, is that sports is what they're selling is they're tapping into a certain level of delusion and mania, right? That they're selling to the people. you don't want to snap your customers out of that delusion and mania with too much real talk. Because that kind of fucks up the fantasy and the delusion. Like, you can't just keep invoking, like, well, this already happens. Well, these guys are mercenaries and don't give a fuck about your team or your city, actually. Well, this is what... You can't do that as a business, man. That's why they need to be policing this shit more strictly, honestly, man. Because they just, like, you can't have this. You know, like at a certain point where Kyrie's like, oh, January 6th, I got paid sick leave. I'm like, come on, fam. What are we doing? This is sports.
I want to say I wrote about this. I did a whole column about this in 0809 range about the illusion of hope. I think that was what I called the column, where it was like that became this new thing the NBA was kind of selling us, right? It was like, you don't have hope, but maybe down the road you will. And it's like, oh. And I think it was in the 0809 range because we had all those teams kind of jockeying to create 2010 cap space, right? And at some point we were all looking at it going, well, there's 8 teams that are going to have cap space. There's 4 guys you want. Some people are going to have their feelings hurt, but everybody was doing it. There was no tanking rules against it. And people were sitting guys and doing the whole thing. And I feel like that's around when it started for the illusion of hope thing. Before then, I just think the GMs and the teams were pretty stupid. Like, they didn't look at team building. That they weren't thinking like 7 chess moves ahead. Riley was really the first guy who started thinking that way. The Knicks tried, but they were incompetent. But now it's basically been a decade and a half of it, KOC.
Could the NBA have something like, I was just thinking about this while you guys were talking there, but like for like this illusion of hope, maybe the solution could be like a 2-way no trade clause where the player and the team are married to each other for the duration of the Supermax. Is there, like, if you're talking about, you're worried about players demanding trades, I'm just trying to think of solutions. I don't know if this is a good idea, but I'm just throwing that thought out there where like the player cannot be traded. The team can't trade the player cannot request a trade. They're together for 3 years, 4 years, whatever it might be.
I wrote that. I looked it up. I wrote it February 2010. And it was like, at that time we had, Jermaine O'Neal was making more money than Kevin Durant and Westbrook and Harden, all those guys combined. I had Rasheed Wallace rope the Celtics into that terrible contract that they regretted. We had Tracy McGrady making $22.4 million a year on the bench, not being able to be traded. Gilbert Arenas, Chauncey Billups. We had Jamal Tinsley being paid not to play. So it was its own kind of crisis, right? We had a lot of guys making big money that either were hurt, weren't playing, and it was bad, and there was no way out, and you couldn't fix your team. And the solution was, let's make the contract shorter, but now we're in the merry-go-round era. And I guess in some ways it's more fun, but
I think it would be fine. I think all of this stuff would be fine if, again, like the stuff with the regular season, I really think 82 games, I know I'm not a genius for saying this, is just too freaking long. There's too many games. And another problem, it's hard for like casual fans to figure out when they need to care about the NBA besides the playoffs. Like, when should you be watching regular season NBA? When guys aren't sitting down, well, that's happening all season. When teams aren't tanking, well, pretty much after the trade deadline, they're off to the races, except for the Sacramento Kings. Like, when are you supposed to be watching, when are you supposed to be watching the NBA?
Do you guys feel that this year? Do you feel it like, does the Thursday night game feel like it used to? The TNT game? Do you feel like the same kind of whatever? Because I'm with you. I don't feel it
too much inventory.
Well, the contenders have all been in such flux that I think it's made it less, consistently like end to end. Well, COVID's had a big part of that too.
Yeah.
But I was going to say too that to tack on to your thing about the hope is, I mean, if people, and I think Woz said some version of this too, that like if people stopped hoping, then the product would fail. I think what they've done is kind of like what TV shows have done, where they've talked about this on some of our pods, where it's like TV shows figured out at some point that like the theorizing was the thing that really got people going. And, and it's like, and like the hope is the dopamine that they can continue to like And I think I think the social media thing is kind of I'm becoming Charlie from Always Sunny in the room with the pointing now, but like the social media is the same type of like algorithmic, like you're just on the hook. It's like this hit that you just keep wanting. And I think fans, they can say they hate it, but they just keep coming back because that hope is so seductive. And we see that around the draft too. I mean, people just they keep falling for it over and over again. That illusion of hope. The hope is the product that they keep getting.
I mean, they
by.
keep coming back for the tweets and the transactions, but can they come watch Şengün play for the love of God? KOC?
Oh baby.
I mean, I think that exists though. I mean,
Okay.
I do. I think like I did like a Şengün video and it gets like 100,000 views. Like Kyle, your OKC video got like 500K views on YouTube. Like there's like
That's
I think
exactly
there's a market. There's a market for these players who are under the radar and these teams, like you mentioned earlier, Bill, the Cavs, the Grizzlies. People love those teams, those players. I still think like there's a general excitement that fans have for that. It's just we have it all. It's like that's what the internet is. Like the internet gives you everything all at once. There's something for everybody. And I think that's what the NBA provides. There's something for everybody, depending on your style of a fan that you are.
I was thinking back about this today to tie in what you're saying, KOC. You know, my relationship with James Harden, totally disconnected from him. I don't have an NBA team. I always say I skate between people's misery. I go to sleep at night, sleep like a baby. I don't care. But like James Harden, I was thinking about James Harden and I was like, when was the time in my life when I most enjoyed him? And I was talking to a buddy of mine. I was like, can you remember when James Harden was this like 6-man secondary playmaker that could just go off and he terrified other playoff teams to the point where they would try to shut him down? That was the most fun he ever was. And that was like before he was an actualized thing. And I think people just get really excited about it. Like you were talking about, KOC, that the expectations just kind of become the death of joy. That's why it's more fun to root for a team that's hasn't gotten there yet because the pressure's not on yet. So you're playing with house money and it's
the Memphis stage right now in Cleveland. Same thing. Best example.